The room fell silent. Miss Thompson's face went pale. The other kids sat in stunned confusion. Finally, she cleared her throat and, with as much composure as she could manage, pointed toward the door. "Johnny, please go to the principal's office." 15 minutes later, Johnny strolled back into the classroom, looking completely unfazed. Miss Thompson, still recovering from shock, hesitated before asking, "Did you tell the principal what you said in class?" Johnny nodded. "Yep." "And what did he say?" Johnny shrugged. "He said that every job is important in our economy, gave me an apple, and asked for my mom's phone number." One quiet afternoon, a policeman was patrolling a peaceful neighborhood when he spotted a small boy standing on tiptoe, straining to reach the doorbell of a house across the street. The boy hopped, stretched, and even tried using his tiny fists to knock, but the bell was just too high. The officer watched for a moment, amused by the child's determination. Then, with a kind smile, he decided to lend a hand. Stepping across the street, he approached the boy, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and said, "Here, let me help you." With one firm push, he gave the doorbell a solid ring. As the chime echoed through the house, the policeman crouched down to the boy's level and, still smiling, asked warmly, "And now what, my little man?" The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Now we run!" One Sunday morning, a little girl sat in church beside her mother, fidgeting uncomfortably. After a few minutes, she tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can we leave now?" Her mother shook her head. "Not yet, sweetheart. The service isn't over." The little girl groaned. "But I think I have to throw up." Startled, her mother whispered urgently, "Then go outside, walk around to the back of the church, and throw up behind a bush." Nodding, the little girl quickly slipped out of the pew and hurried toward the entrance. Less than a minute later, she was back, sitting quietly in her seat. Her mother looked at her, confused. "Did you throw up?" The little girl nodded. "Yep." Her mother frowned. "How did you go all the way to the back of the church and return so quickly?" The little girl grinned proudly. "I didn't have to go outside, Mommy. They have a box next to the front door that says, 'For the sick.'" One quiet afternoon, a middle-aged professor was buried in his paperwork when a knock at his office door startled him. He fumbled for his glasses, straightened his tie, and called out, "Come in!" The door swung open, revealing an elderly man with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, Professor," the old man greeted. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I used to work in this very office 30 years ago when I was a professor at this college." The professor smiled politely. "Not at all. Please come in. It must be nice to revisit old memories." The old man stepped inside and took a long, nostalgic look around. He ran his fingers along the wooden desk, glanced at the ventilator humming softly, and admired the familiar window overlooking the garden. "Ah, the same old room, the same wooden table, the same ventilator, the same old window with that lovely view." He sighed contentedly before resting his hand on the desk. And, of course, the same old desk. Just then he noticed something unusual. A young woman crouched under the desk. His eyebrows lifted in curiosity. The younger professor instantly stiffened, his face turning red. Don't misunderstand," he stammered, waving his hands. "She's my daughter. She dropped her earring and is searching for it." The old professor sighed, shaking his head with a knowing smile. "And the same old story." Johnny had just moved into his New York apartment and went down to the lobby to put his name on the mailbox. As he was doing so, the door to a nearby apartment opened, and out stepped a stunning young woman wearing only a robe. She smiled at Johnny, and they struck up a conversation. As they chatted, her robe slowly slipped open, revealing, well, everything. Poor Johnny started sweating, desperately trying to keep his eyes on hers. After a few moments, she gently placed a hand on his arm and whispered, "Let's go inside. I hear someone coming." Johnny, flustered but eager, stepped into her apartment. As soon as she shut the door, she leaned against it and let her robe fall to the floor, completely naked. She purred, "Tell me, what do you think is my best feature?" Johnny, still red-faced and struggling to speak, gulped and squeaked out, your ears." She blinked in shock. "My ears? Look at me. Out of all that, why on earth would you pick my ears?" Johnny swallowed hard and cleared his throat. "Because when you said you heard someone coming outside, that was me." The boss was puzzled. One of his most reliable employees hadn't shown up for work and hadn't even called in. There was an urgent issue that needed his expertise, so the boss decided to check in. He dialed the employee's home number. After a few rings, a small voice whispered, "Hello? Hi there, is your daddy home?" the boss asked. "Yes," the child whispered. "May I talk to him?" "No." The boss frowned. "Is your mommy home?" "Yes." "Can I talk to her?" "No." Now truly perplexed, the boss asked, "Is there anyone else there?" "Yes," the child whispered again. "A policeman." The boss's eyebrows shot up. "A policeman? May I speak with him?" "No, he's busy." Feeling uneasy, the boss pressed on. "Busy doing what?" "Talking to Mommy and Daddy and the firemen," came the hushed reply. The boss's concern deepened. Then, through the phone, he heard a loud rhythmic sound in the background. "What is that noise?" he asked. "A helicopter," the child answered in a whisper. Now completely alarmed, the boss demanded, "What on earth is going on over there?" There was a brief pause, then a muffled giggle. "The search team just landed a helicopter." The boss's stomach tightened. Search team? What are they searching for? The child's voice came through, still whispering, but now barely containing laughter. Me. Mrs. Parks, the sixth-grade science teacher, stood in front of the class with a mischievous smile. Class, here's a question for you, she said. Which human body part increases to 10 times its size when stimulated? The room fell silent. Students exchanged nervous glances, their faces turning various shades of red. No one dared to answer, until little Mary shot up from her seat, scandalized. Mrs. Parks, she gasped, you should not be asking sixth graders a question like that. I'm going to tell my parents and they'll tell the principal, and then you'll be fired. The class held its breath, but Mrs. Parks, unfazed, simply repeated the question. I'll ask again, what body part increases to 10 times its size when stimulated? Mary's jaw dropped in disbelief. Oh, she's so getting in trouble for this, she whispered to her classmates. Finally, after a long and uncomfortable silence, Billy hesitantly raised his hand. He swallowed hard, glanced around, and answered, the pupil of the eye? Mrs. Parks beamed. Very good, Billy. Then, turning to Mary, she added with a smirk, and as for you, young lady, I have 3 things to say. 1, you have a dirty mind. 2, you didn't read your homework. And 3, one day, you are going to be very, very disappointed. The class erupted into laughter while Mary slumped in her seat, realizing that maybe, just maybe, she had a little more learning to do. It was the start of a new academic year, and the excitement of the incoming freshmen was palpable. The Dean of Women, a stern yet well-meaning figure, stood before the assembled students ready to impart wisdom as part of their college orientation. Among the many topics she covered, she decided to address one particularly delicate matter: sexual morality. This college, after all, prided itself on its conservative values. Clearing her throat, she gazed across the hall and said firmly, In moments of temptation, young ladies, I urge you to ask yourselves just one question. Is an hour of pleasure worth a lifetime of shame? A murmur rippled through the crowd as the students nodded, some more half-heartedly than others. The dean continued with her lecture, satisfied that her words had made an impact. As she wrapped up, she opened the floor for questions. A timid hand shot up from the middle of the audience. Yes, dear, the dean said, pleased at the engagement. The girl hesitated, then asked innocently, How do you make it last for a whole hour? For a full 3 seconds, silence hung over the room. Then the hall erupted into laughter while the dean turned a deep shade of crimson. It was safe to say that, for the students, orientation had just become a lot more memorable. It was a bright afternoon at the college cafeteria when a student approached his professor's table, hoping to sit beside him. Before he could even ask, the professor glanced up with a smirk and said condescendingly, A swan shan't be friends with a pig. Without missing a beat, the student smiled and replied, Then I shall fly on. The professor was taken aback by the quick-witted response, but rather than letting it go, he stewed in irritation. He decided then and there that he would make the student regret his insolence. When exam day arrived, the professor saw his chance. During the oral examination, he bombarded the student with the hardest questions he could think of, but to his frustration, the student answered every single one flawlessly. Refusing to admit defeat, the professor tried a different approach. You're walking down a road and come across 2 bags, he said, leaning forward. One contains gold, the other cleverness. Which do you choose? The student barely hesitated. The gold, the professor scoffed. I disagree. I would choose cleverness because intelligence is far more valuable than money. The student smiled knowingly. Well, sir, everyone chooses what they don't have. A hush fell over the room. The professor's face turned beet red as a few students muffled their laughter. Seething with rage, he grabbed the student's exam paper and, in an act of petty revenge, scrawled a single word across it, ASS. The student took the paper without looking at it and calmly walked away. But just a moment later, he returned. With a polite smile, he handed the paper back and said, Excuse me, sir, you signed my paper, but you forgot to give me my grade. After 17 years of marriage, Tom decided he wanted a fresh start, with someone much younger. He coldly informed his wife, Linda, that he was leaving her and moving in with his new love. The upscale apartment they had shared for years was in his name, and he insisted that she move out. To soften the blow, or perhaps just to ease his guilt, he promised to buy her a new place. Linda, though heartbroken, remained composed. She agreed to move out, but requested 3 days alone in the apartment to pack her things in peace. Tom, eager to start his new life, saw no harm in it and left her to it. On the first day, Linda carefully packed her belongings into boxes, suitcases, and crates, reminiscing about all the years she had spent in the home she was now being forced to leave. On the second day, the movers arrived, efficiently taking everything away. On the third day, Linda decided to have a proper farewell. She set the dining table with elegant candlelight, played soft music, and indulged in a luxurious dinner, a pound of shrimp and a bottle of chilled Chardonnay. She savored every bite, took her time, and enjoyed the moment. But before she left, she had one final task. Moving room to room, she took the leftover shrimp shells and carefully stuffed them into the hollow curtain rods. Then, with a satisfied smile, she cleaned up, locked the door, and walked away. Tom soon returned, thrilled to begin his new chapter with his young girlfriend. At first, everything was perfect. They decorated the place to their liking and reveled in their fresh start. Then, it began. A strange odor, subtle at first, started creeping through the apartment. Within days, it became unbearable. They scrubbed, they mopped, they aired out the rooms. They called in cleaners, checked the air vents, and even had pest control inspect for dead rodents. Nothing helped. The stench only grew worse. Desperate, they replaced the carpets, repainted the walls, and even considered selling the furniture. They burned candles, sprayed air fresheners, and kept the windows wide open. But no matter what they did, the putrid smell persisted, clinging to every corner of the apartment. With no other options, they made the painful decision to move out. On moving day, professional movers packed up everything with meticulous care, ensuring nothing was left behind. They took the furniture, the clothes, the decor, and of course, the curtain rods. One evening, over a few drinks, two friends, Mike and John, got into a lighthearted discussion about relationships. "Mike," John said, swirling his whiskey, "have you ever thought about the difference between a wife and a girlfriend?" Mike chuckled. "Oh, I think about it all the time. In fact, I've come up with the perfect comparison." John leaned in, intrigued. "Let's hear it." "All right," Mike said, grinning. "A wife is like a TV, while a girlfriend is like a mobile phone." John raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting take. Explain." "Simple," Mike continued. "At home, you watch TV, but when you go out, you always take your mobile with you." "Fair enough," John nodded. "Sometimes you enjoy the TV, but let's be honest. Most of the time, you're busy playing with your mobile." John laughed. "Sounds about right. Go on." "Here's where it gets interesting," Mike said, taking a sip of his drink. "A TV is pretty much free for life. Sure, you pay for cable or streaming, but the TV itself, it stays. A mobile, on the other hand, comes with constant bills. If you don't pay, the services get cut off, instantly." John shook his head, amused. "That's a brutal truth. TVs are big, bulky, and often, well, let's just say not as new." Mike smirked. "Mobiles? Slim, curvy, sleek, replaceable, and most importantly, portable." John burst out laughing. "I see where this is going." "And don't forget the costs," Mike added. "The operational expenses of a TV? Pretty reasonable. A mobile? Always demanding more. Upgrades, repairs, new plans, it never ends." John was now fully invested in the analogy. "But what about control? Who's in charge?" Mike grinned. "TVs come with a remote. You have some control, at least in theory. A mobile, no remote. It runs the show and you just follow along." John smirked. "And communication? Ah," Mike exclaimed. "That's the key difference. A mobile is a two-way communication device. You talk, it responds. But a TV? Oh no, my friend. With a TV, you listen. Whether you like it or not, it keeps talking and you just sit there nodding." John laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "All right, that's brilliant. But which one is better?" Mike leaned in with a smirk. "Well, here's the twist. TVs don't get viruses. Mobiles, oh, they're full of them. Bugs, glitches, and if you're not careful, they can get hacked or even stolen." John shook his head, raising his glass. "Lesson learned. Stick to the TV, huh?" Mike clinked his glass. "Issued in the public's best interest." One afternoon, a young man stopped by McDonald's for a quick meal. As he sat down with his burger and fries, he noticed an elderly couple at a nearby table. Something about them caught his attention. They had ordered just one meal, one burger, one drink, and one portion of fries. But what fascinated him most was how carefully they divided everything. With great precision, the old gentleman cut the burger in half, placing one portion in front of his wife. Then he counted out the fries, one for him, one for her, until the pile was evenly split. Lastly, he poured half the soft drink into an extra cup and slid it across the table. The young man watched, touched by the sight. What a beautiful bond, he thought. They must be on a tight budget, but they still share everything equally. However, as he continued to observe, he noticed something odd. The old man had started eating, but the wife wasn't touching her food. She simply sat there, smiling, watching her husband chew. The young man couldn't take it anymore. He leaned forward and said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't mean to intrude, but I'd be more than happy to buy another meal so your wife can eat as well." The old man chuckled warmly and shook his head. "Oh, no, son, that's very kind of you, but that won't be necessary. You see, we've been married for many, many years, and in our marriage, everything has always been shared. 50/50ths. The young man smiled, touched by their devotion. "That's really admirable," he said. Then, turning to the wife, he asked gently, "Ma'am, but why aren't you eating your share?" The elderly woman patted her husband's hand lovingly and said with a twinkle in her eye, "Not yet, dear. It's his turn to use the teeth." After just a year of living in Canada, Piotr, a Polish immigrant, found himself in a situation he never expected, sitting anxiously in a lawyer's office, begging for a quick divorce. The lawyer, a seasoned professional, leaned forward and asked, "All right, Mr. Piotr, let's start with the basics. Do you have any grounds?" Piotr nodded enthusiastically. "Ja, we have 1.5 acres. Nice little house, too." The lawyer sighed. No, I mean, what is the foundation of your case?" Piotr scratched his head. "Oh, concrete. Very solid, no cracks." Trying to stay patient, the lawyer rephrased, "Does either of you have a grudge?" Piotr smiled. No grudge, but we have big carport, fits 2 cars. The lawyer took a deep breath and tried again. "Sir, I need to understand your relationships. What are your relations like?" Piotr shrugged. "Oh, all my relations in Poland, only me and wife here." The lawyer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Okay, let's cut to the chase. Is there any infidelity in your marriage?" Piotr's face lit up. Ja, very good fidelity. We have stereo CD player, very clear sound." The lawyer sighed, now rubbing his temples. No, I mean, does your wife beat you up?" Piotr chuckled. No, I wake up before her." Desperate to get to the root of the problem, the lawyer asked, "Okay, is your wife a nagger?" Piotr's eyes went wide. "What? No, she is white." The lawyer, nearly defeated, slumped back in his chair. "Sir, let's just get to the real reason. Why do you want a divorce?" Piotr's face turned serious. He leaned in and whispered, "Because she's trying to kill me." The lawyer sat up straight. "Kill you? What makes you say that?" Piotr reached into his jacket, pulled out a small bottle, and placed it on the lawyer's desk. "I have proof." The lawyer picked up the bottle and read the label. "Polish remover." It was career day in Miss Thompson's classroom, and the students were eagerly sharing what their mothers did for a living. "My mom's a doctor," one little girl announced proudly. "My mom's an engineer," another student chimed in. One by one, the children stood up and shared their mother's professions, each receiving a nod of approval from Miss Thompson. Then it was little Johnny's turn. He stood up confidently and said, "My mom's a streetwalker." The room fell silent. Miss Thompson's face went pale. The other kids sat in stunned confusion. Finally, she cleared her throat and, with as much composure as she could manage, pointed toward the door. "Johnny, please go to the principal's office." 15 minutes later, Johnny strolled back into the classroom, looking completely unfazed. Miss Thompson, still recovering from shock, hesitated before asking, "Did you tell the principal what you said in class?" Johnny nodded. "Yep. And what did he say?" Johnny shrugged. "He said that every job is important in our economy, gave me an apple, and asked for my mom's phone number." Jack woke up with the worst hangover of his life. His head pounded like a drum, his mouth felt like sandpaper, and he had no memory of how he got home from the company's Christmas party. Jack wasn't a heavy drinker, but last night's drinks had gone down way too smoothly. He groaned, fearing the worst. Did I do something stupid? Slowly, he forced his eyes open. The first thing he saw was a glass of water and 2 aspirin neatly placed on the nightstand. Next to them lay a single red rose. He frowned. That's unexpected. Jack sat up and noticed something even stranger. His clothes from last night were clean, pressed, and folded at the foot of the bed. The room was spotless. In fact, the entire house was immaculate. Stumbling into the bathroom, Jack winced when he caught his reflection. A massive black eye stared back at him. Then he noticed a note taped to the mirror. It was written in red ink, decorated with little hearts, and sealed with a lipstick kiss from his wife, Jillian. "Honey, breakfast is on the stove. I left early to get groceries to make your favorite dinner tonight. I love you, darling." Jack was officially confused. Still groggy, he made his way to the kitchen. Sure enough, a hot breakfast, steaming coffee, and the morning newspaper were waiting for him. His son sat at the table, casually eating his cereal. Jack sat down with a grunt. "Son, what happened last night?" His son barely looked up. "Oh, you came home after 3 a.m. drunk out of your mind. You tripped over the coffee table and broke it. Then you threw up in the hallway, and you got that black eye when you ran into the door." Jack rubbed his temples. That sounds about right. But then, why is everything so perfect this morning? The house is clean, I got a rose, and breakfast is waiting for me." His son smirked. "Oh, that? Well, Mom dragged you to the bedroom, and when she tried to take your pants off, you screamed, 'Leave me alone, I'm married.'"